John, start us off. How did you get involved with the United States Navy in 1943?
Well, after graduation in 1943, all my classmates were going into the service. I didn't want to be drafted into the Army because I liked the water and I didn't like to be sleeping in tents. So I enlisted in late 43 up at the Naval Recruitment Center on Market Street in Philadelphia. And from there I was sent to boot camp at Sampson, New York.
Now, Sampson, New York is upstate New York, correct?
Upstate New York near the Finger Lakes.
Cold in the wintertime?
Cold. I was there in January. I know very well, especially when we had to go take our swimming tests, walking in the snow to the swimming pool. But so after boot camp,
And before we go on, describe boot camp? How long was it, and what did they train you on?
well, it's a combination. I would think when you're young, 17, 18 years old, it's more of a discipline thing, getting you disciplined to Navy life. A lot of marching drills, stuff like that. Swimming drills, of course. Marching was the main thing, though. I would say just marching and discipline.
How to be organized as a unit and work together
Organized,
and follow orders.
We were Unit 13. I'll never forget that. And we had about, I would say we had about 100 men in our unit at that time. So after that, boot camp, I was sent to amphibious training in Little Creek, Virginia, to train for an amphibious ship. And that was about 8 or 10 weeks of training. And then we picked up this ship in Charleston, South Carolina.
Tell us about your amphibious training. This is for the historical record so people understand it 100, 200 years from now.
The amphibious training was getting used to a ship, a small ship such as ours, where there was only 55 men and 5 officers. They're getting acclimated to living as a unit and so forth, and also learning how an amphibious ship operates. We would go for our shakedown cruise in the Chesapeake, Rehoboth Beach. I remember that. That's where we practiced our beaching. We would go out to sea and then hit the beach, open the doors, and let so-called tanks on the beach.
And that's on an LSM?
That's on an LSM.
Now, when you're beaching, I read something about it as I was doing research for the interview, is that about 100 yards out from the shore, you would drop anchor?
That's
And
correct.
explain why that is and how that works.
Well, we would drop anchor, like you say, about 100 feet or so out. And that anchor had to dig into the bottom of the ocean because that had to pull you back off the beach. And God forbid, if that thing didn't pull you off the beach, you were just like a sitting duck. And I've seen that happen many times where a ship would beach and they'd be trying to be pulled back. And for some reason, this anchor didn't pull them back off the beach.
So they have a big winch on the back of the ship.
Big winch, yes. And that thing was pulling you enough just so you could steer around, turn, and then go out to sea. So we did that for many weeks.
And what you said you saw ships where the anchor would slip or wouldn't work. What happened to those ships?
It wouldn't work. We would see them. My God, we'd say, those ships aren't coming back with us. So we were going back and heading out to sea, but we couldn't understand why these other LSTs, LSMs, weren't following us. So the captain, whoever told us, said they probably, the anchor didn't either catch enough into the bottom of the ocean to pull them, or there's something along with the wrench to pull them back.
That never happened to your ship, I
No,
think. Okay.
thankfully.
So at amphibious school in Little Creek, Virginia, then you were actually trained on an LSM.
That's correct.
And talk to us a little bit before we go any further about the LSM. What does it look like? How big is it? The crew, officers, and so on like that.
I think it's about 208 feet long, if I'm not it'll only go around 10 knots an hour. They used to call the LST a large slow target because they wouldn't go over, I don't think 10 knots an hour was full speed. So there was, like I said before, there was 55 men and 5 officers on the ship. We lived in fairly close quarters. And my job as radio man, I was up in the radio shack on the conning tower. So it was pretty good duty because you were 4 hours on, 4 hours off.
And the conning tower that John's referred to is on the starboard side of the ship, about midway aft, and it's about how high was conning tower? About 30 feet?
20, 30 feet.
20, 30 feet.
30
and
feet.
that's where most of the operation of the ship would take place. And we will have, for the person watching this interview, we will have a close-up of some of the pictures John will hold up and narrate them to us.
Okay.
We're also going to copy those and link those to his interview data on the computer so people can look at the full picture later on. But we'll get that at the end of the interview.
Okay.
Now, you said you're a communicator. So after Little Creek, did you go to communication school? What?
Yes.
Tell us about that. Where was it held and how long was it?
Well, after, I'm ahead of my story because after boot camp, I was sent to Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania for 12 weeks of radio operating school. And to graduate, you had to send and receive 25 words per minute. Upon graduation, you'd be assigned to whether you're going to submarine duty, destroyer, whatever, and I got picked for amphibious duty. So I was ahead of my story. So that's when I was headed to Little Creek.
Now, before you go to Little Creek, you're picked for amphibious duty. Back at that time, was there any more choice duty or duty you feared? Was it more dangerous to be an amphibious on aircraft carriers or subs? Do you recall, or was it just all the same as far as you're concerned?
I had volunteered for submarines, but I flunked out because I didn't pass the claustrophobic test. So I just took whatever they assigned me to. Some fellows got destroyers, so they had a group of us that got amphibious, so I just went along.
Okay, sure. I see. So at comm school then, they're training you on the use of what communication devices? Telegraph? You're a telegraph largely?
Mostly telegraph, yes.
Now, you brought something with us that you want to tell us about if you can for a minute.
Yes.
We're not skipping too far ahead, but this is while we're talking about your comm training.
Okay.
And let me just hold that up, and I will pull back the camera. And what are you holding there? Show it to us. I'm going to focus
I'm holding my telegraph key. I snitched this off the ship.
We're not supposed to tell anybody about it, right?
Okay.
And hold it facing the camera like that. Just turn it like this.
Like this.
Up the other way. Turn it all perfect, just like that.
Okay.
Good.
That's
And tell us about this key.
That's the telegraph key I used when I was on duty, or the other. We had 3 radio men. That's what they used also to send messages. We received and sent messages by Morse code. So I remember if I can go forward, fast forward, sometime in 1945, maybe around August of 45, near the date the Japanese surrendered, I was on duty in the radio shack, and I took the message which said the Japanese had surrendered. We were getting ready for the invasion of Japan at the time. So when we got that message, I brought it down to the captain immediately, and he just sounded the general alarm sound, and everybody was happy. I seen grown men crying because I was only an 18-year-old sailor, but I seen sailors there in their mid-20s who had families at home, and they literally started to cry when they announced that the war was over. So that was one of my experiences on.
Did you ever get to keep that message?
You know, I ripped it off and gave it to the captain. I sometimes I wish I would have had, but.
So when you receive a message in, you're sitting there listening, and you type. Do you handwrite it out or
You're typing.
You're typing as it comes over the
Typing
wire.
as it's coming over. So,
And so ultimately, how fast could you send a message? How many words a minute?
25 words a minute I could send and receive.
See.
You had to do that at radio school to graduate.
I see. So at radio school, then you're practicing for how many weeks again? Was it
We were there for 3 months.
3 months?
Yeah.
12 weeks.
12 weeks.
And what was involved in radio school? Of course, you have to learn the Morse code. And what else? The equipment.
Typing. Not so much equipment because we weren't involved with the equipment so much. The equipment was on the ship when we got there, and we weren't radio technicians. We were radio operators. So at school, most of the time was spent on sending and receiving. Procedure, that was another main course. How to proceed your message, just like writing a letter. You had to know how to send the message and what format to use.
There's like an introduction, a format, the message, the body, and then conclusion. And wrap it up like that.
That's correct.
I see.
And then, so it was mainly sending and receiving, procedure, and typing. You had to know how to type. And you had to type fast.
Yeah. So you had ultimately, you're going to have 3 men aboard your ship that were telegraphers.
Three radio operators.
And so you had the ship, the communications going 24 hours a day, obviously.
Yes.
8 hours on and 8 hours off watching.
Right.
Now, in the Navy, when you're a communicator, you didn't have to do standing watch on deck or anything, did you?
No. It was a good part of our radio operators do. We had no deck duty, swabbing the decks or nothing. That's all we did was radio work.
By the way, and I may be skipping ahead a little bit here, but when you're working as a communicator aboard the USS LSM 302, did you, besides a message ending the war, did you ever receive any other messages that stick in your mind about battles, ships sinking, anything like that just stands out in your mind?
No, I can't think of anything earth-shattering like that, but we would get a lot of weather reports, NSS, telling us how the weather is.
NSS means?
I think that was the weather station, I think, if my recollection is sure. There was a radio station that we had to have on mostly all the time because to pick up any storms or typhoons.
And this will be ultimately in the South Pacific where you're operating.
Pacific, yeah.
Sure, a lot of storms come up there.
Right.
Okay. So let's proceed on then. We talked about communication school. We talked about amphibious warfare school. So really, before you actually go and join the fleet, you're in boot camp, which lasted how many weeks?
I think that was 8 or 10 weeks.
8 or 10 weeks. Communication school is 12 weeks.
12 weeks.
Amphibious school, how long?
That was about 6 weeks.
So you're speaking when you're almost 30 weeks before you joined the fleet of training.
That's correct.
So did you feel you were quite well trained that's almost 2/3 of a year before you went off and did your work?
We were ready to go.
After
all that, we're ready to go.
By the way, what was the attitude of all the men you're training with, even before you joined the ship, LSM 302? What was their attitude towards the war?
Didn't give them much thought. When you're 17, 18 years old, you're there, I hate to say it, you're adventurous. You're not thinking too. I always thought to myself, boy, if I was a 25, 30-year-old guy out on the Pacific there, I'd be scared to death because I recollect back seeing some of my shipmates who were 25 or older, and they were quite tense, more tense than us guys who were 18, 19. We'd kid around and all, but you could see that they were more aloof.
A little more nervous. They realized what they're involved in.
Exactly right.
Okay. So after all your training then, tell us what happens next. You're finished with all the training. You're out of amphibious school.
Out of amphibious school. Then we picked up our ship at Charleston, South Carolina.
Did the whole unit pick up the ship at once?
You trained as a crew.
Oh, so at amphib school you're trained as a crew then?
Big Quonset hut with the whole crew. The engineer department, the radio operators, the signalmen, all in one unit.
So you had this sense of unit cohesion by the time you got your ship.
Correct.
Very interesting. Was it a new ship?
Brand new ship in Charleston, South Carolina.
What was your impressions of the ship when you first went aboard?
Well, we were anxious to get aboard. We were anxious to get going. Because we'd been on land for so long, we thought, when are we going to be in the Navy? You know, that type of attitude. So we were anxious to get aboard. Then we went out on our shakedown cruise, and then we went. Am I heading myself? Am I going too far?
Perfect.
Went a shakedown cruise, and then we headed to the West Coast. I think we stopped at San Diego, and then from San Diego we headed to Pearl Harbor, and that was going to be our home base, so to speak, where we'd ferry things back from Pearl to the islands like Wake, Okinawa, either tanks or fuel or whatever cargo they would give us.
Now, on the trip over from the East Coast through Panama Canal
Yes.
over to Hawaii, what was that trip like? Because you're on a ship, which is it fairly flat, or does it have a bow in it at the bow?
The ship
Did it have a keel on it?
no keel, flat bottom.
Oh, tell us what the trip was like.
Flat bottom. Well, fortunately, we didn't hit any rough weather from the East Coast to the West Coast. But I can tell you later, when we were in the Pacific, when we had some rough weather, that baby bounced like a rubber ball. It wouldn't cut the water; it would just flop and bang up and down. So until we got to Pearl, we didn't have much of that. But after Pearl, when we were ferrying things to different islands, we had to outrun the typhoon in Okinawa. That was back in 44 or something like that. That
Typhoon of 44,
40 something like that.
December 44. There's
something
a typhoon.
like that.
Yeah.
When we were told, got the radio message to try to outrun the typhoon. In other words, get out of the harbor, because that's where you can get banged up. So we outran it pretty good, but boy, it was rough. I mean, the water came right over the ship. That baby went down. The swells were like 10 foot high, and the ship was down and up like a rubber ball.
And for the person listening to this interview someday, the ship is open. It's an open hold ship where you would store all of your trucks, tanks, and so on like that.
That's correct.
So the water comes over the side.
It comes over the side, right down. Where it went out, I don't know. I wasn't too sophisticated in that area, but had to go out somewhere.
You ever get seasick?
No, fortunately, I never did. And when it become chow time, nobody'd be in the chow hall but me. And the cook would say, "Johnny Q, what are you doing down there? I got to cook for you. I'm hungry." But he used to get ticked off because I was the only guy really that wasn't sick. So he'd make me a sandwich or something. But I seen guys really sick on that ship. Yeah.
I guess that's not the ship to be on if you're going to get seasick. It's such a small ship, 208 feet long.
Oh my God!
Bouncy.
And be thankful you're not sleeping in the bottom bunk.
Why is that?
Well, the guy up top might be puking. Or something,
Right.
You know. Okay.
By the way, on the ship, tell us what your cruise quarters were like. What were the conditions you slept in, worked in, and so on?
They were very tight. There were 3 bunks high, and like I said, there was 55 men. So I think there was 2 different areas for sleeping quarters. So, but it was fairly comfortable.
Were the sleeping quarters below the deck, or were they
below the deck?
below the deck?
Below the deck.
Yeah.
And it was, it's fairly comfortable. We ate down where the sleeping quarters were. They had long tables there. So where we slept, that's where we ate. And they had the ladders that went up into the galley.
So you had to go up a ladder to get your food, then bring it back down.
Right.
So during rough seas, it's kind of hard to carry your coffee down or something.
Very rough. Yeah.
Did all the men? I guess the men had to get along well on a ship like this.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Because if not, like I say, close quarters. But fortunately, we never had any trouble.
And how much gear could you bring on a ship? Did you have like a wooden foot locker? Did you have wall lockers?
I had a big duffel bag. Big
sea bag.
sea bag. That's it. That's the word. You had all your stuff in a sea bag. That's it. You had a little locker.
And that was it. So you stuffed everything in that sea bag into the locker?
Into the locker. That's right.
And you lived like that for almost 2 years?
Almost 2 years. Yeah.
And so as a 17, 18-year-old, it didn't bother you, I guess that way.
Didn't bother me a bit. Sure. No. It's very adventurous.
Talk about an average day in your life aboard the ship. What would it be like for you as a ultimately a communicator aboard the 302 LSM.
Well, when you're on duty, of course, you're in the radio shack doing your duty. When you're off duty, not much to do. I mean, write letters or go down below and maybe play cribbage or something with the other guys off duty. Play cards, something like that. Nothing much. I used to have. I was in charge. I was the head radio man, so I had charge of the piping system of music and so forth on the ship. So I would pipe music. I was a Frank Sinatra fan. So they'd send these V discs over to us.
V discs.
You remember V discs? The entertainers made. They called them, I guess it meant victory discs.
Victory discs.
So they'd send them to us. We'd get them in packages. So we had one of Frank Sinatra, of course, and I kept playing Frank Sinatra over and over. And those guys would say, "When are you gonna play? When are you gonna play something else?" But I had charge of playing the music, and that was entertaining. You know, all the big entertainers like Sinatra, Perry Como, they made these V discs for us to play.
And how would you get those? Through mail or
Through the mail?
Pick them up at Pearl Harbor with destroyers come
Pearl,
along.
usually at Pearl.
At Pearl, you would pick them up.
I could tell you an interesting story at Pearl. Like I say, we shuttled back and forth from Pearl. Well, we got an assignment to take Christmas mail to China. Tianjin, China, is that the
Shenzhen, China.
Yeah.
Tianjin.
Tianjin? Yeah.
Shenzhen.
So we're docked at Pearl at the pier, and they're loading, you know, and we see these things dropping these Christmas letters and packages, and some of the boxes of cookies breaking, you know, and this shit. But anyway, we get loaded up and we head for, how do you pronounce it?
Shenzhen.
Tianjin, China.
Shenzhen.
So several days of traveling. Well, we're outside the harbor, finally get there, and all the guys are waiting. Oh boy, after we dump off our load, we'll go on Liberty. Never been there before in China. Then we get a radio message that we had the wrong cargo on board. When they loaded at Pearl, instead of the cranes going this way and taking the mail for this, we had the mail for another ship, and all this time and travel for mail.
Why doesn't that sound like the military in action? U.S. military sometimes. They're well intentioned, but it doesn't work. So
Well,
what happened?
We were upset. We got orders to proceed back to Pearl.
Pick up all the mail that you had just delivered, and
We didn't even deliver it. It was still on the ship. Well, we were more upset about not getting Liberty to go into China.
imagine those poor men on the dock waiting for their mail and presents. Sure.
Yeah, that was his experience.
So you went all the way back to Pearl Harbor.
We're back to Pearl with that load. The other ship had our mail and we had their mail. So they came back from somewhere.
Now you're saying your ship was really resupplying places, bringing mail. Did you travel on your own? Did you travel little convoys? How did that work?
Convoys,
Convoys.
yeah. We got orders from Sinpac, I guess it was, where to go and who to go with. So,
And how big would a convoy be? How many ships would be involved in these convoys?
yeah, there could be 10 or 12, I guess, as I recall.
Typical convoy. Describe the type of ships in a 10 or 12 convoy ship.
LSTs, LSMs, and a lot of minesweepers.
Oh, really?
Because we were ferrying, after the islands were secured, we never made any first landings. We went in to refurbish supplies after the island was taken. So after the islands were taken by us, they were starting to make airfields. And our main job at that time was to carry jet fuel to the islands. Well, that meant you were traveling with jet fuel with mine-laden ocean that you could have got blown up at any time if you hit one of those babies. So we had to sleep in our life jackets. We called them May West. 24 hours a day we had to wear our May West because of the danger of the mines.
Did any ship that you were involved in ever get hit with a mine or anything?
No.
So the minesweepers are wooden ships. Were they wooden ships basically, or
Yeah,
no?
I'm not too familiar with what
Okay.
they were.
And they would go ahead of you then.
They were ahead of us, sweeping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looking for any mine. Did you have any destroyers alongside of you to provide protection against Japanese submarines, anything like that? Did they ever?
We could have, but I don't remember.
Okay, sure.
I don't remember.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about Pearl Harbor, and then we'll talk about the islands you went to. What was Pearl Harbor like during the war? You would go on leave in Pearl Harbor, right?
Yes.
Talk to us. What was it like? What'd you see? What'd you do that you can tell us about on the DVD?
Yeah, Pearl Harbor was all new to us because we never been to Hawaii, and take liberty and do the usual things. That hotel that was there, what was the name of that one? There was only one big hotel there, and we went there for a weekend. I remember my buddies and I went on the beach. God, we thought we were, we thought we were in heaven. We were in Hawaii, at the Hawaiian Hilton, and you seen the Diamond Head, and it was sort of an experience for us to be in Hawaii, and nothing other than that. It was exciting. Let me say that.
Now you traveled to different islands. Talk to me about as much you can remember about some of these islands. You were at Wake, Saipan, I think.
Yes.
And what did you see on these islands after the battles occurred? You're there. So take an island, Wake, for example, whatever one's best in your mind, and tell us what you saw.
Well, like I said, we were never in any first landings or first waves. We were always refurbishing the island with our materials. So we were taking small tanks, men, and supplies and so forth. And when we got on those islands, we would see the destruction, the massive. I have some pictures that I can show you. You go to see these caves where they'd have these torches that would to get the Japanese. They used to live in these caves. So when our men were coming ashore, they were sitting ducks. They were living these, and we had to get these flamethrowers. So after we took the island, we'd go aboard, and I got a couple of pictures. We'd see body parts, and it was very ugly looking. And it was just, the islands were nothing pretty. I understand today they're Guam and all of them are built up. They're like resorts. But back then, it was just very destruction everywhere. So all they had was a port to pull in, unload our stuff, and leave.
So you really did you get much time to go on the island, walk around, or were you too busy to do that?
Even if you did get time to walk around, there's no place to walk to. It means it's just the port where you dock.
Is there any island that stands out the most in your mind?
They were all the same.
Give me the name of the islands you visited, as best as you can recall.
Okay. Well, I know there was Guam, Wake, Okinawa, and Saipan. That's the four.
And they had big battles on those islands.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
And like I say, they were already taken when we got there. We had taken them back from the Japanese. So,
interesting enough, Guam today is where Japanese young couples go on their honeymoons. That's a honeymoon island for the Japanese.
I seen pictures. Beautiful.
Beautiful. Yeah, and I was on Okinawa today. 1968, I was stationed on Okinawa for a while.
How was it?
It was quite nice. And now it's even nicer, of course, many years later. But after World War II, Okinawa was totally devastated, of course, in the battles. But when I was there in the late 60s, it had rebuilt. People were very nice. Okinawa was very nice people. I was at a base up in the northern part of Okinawa, Camp Hansen, which is more up in what is called the bush area, up in the mountains. But it was beautiful beaches, crystal clear blue water, friendly people, restaurants to go to eat in. Very different than what you saw.
Oh my God, we didn't see any of that.
Sure.
Yeah.
It was totally devastating. Now, you said you have some pictures, and what we might do is maybe at this point, Hugh can come up and hold the picture steady, and you can just take a look at it, and you can sort of tell us what we should see in that picture.
Oh,
Would that be
okay.
right?
All right.
So, Hugh, I'm going to focus in on it.
Okay. All right, let's start the first one.
And let me just loosen up the camera. Okay.
You hand them to me.
You hold them, Hugh.
Okay.
Okay. All right, hold it right up at your chest then, right up there. Good. Okay, and I'm going to have to focus in tight on this. So here we go. Okay, John, that picture, tell us about that.
That's a picture of my ship, the USS LSM 302. It's in port. And as you can see, it's not a very large ship. Doesn't give you too much of an overview, but that's the 302.
Okay, and next picture.
The next picture.
Why don't you let Hugh hold the picture I'll just focus right in on Hugh's hand as a result.
Okay.
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 Go ahead, Hugh. And let me get a good tight shot of that. Okay, go ahead, John.
That's a picture of the conning tower of our ship. The radio men and the signal men were in charge of chipping paint on the conning tower.
I see.
And that's me up there just posing for a little chipping.
High skill in the Navy, chip paint.
That's it.
If it moves,
that was the conning tower.
Salute it. If it doesn't move, chip it,
Chip
right?
it, right.
That's the expression.
Oh, here's a picture of muster on our muster of our crew.
Okay, Hugh, let me get tight in on that. And that's the entire crew.
Yeah, we had the muster on the deck, 8 a.m. or 800 in the morning or whatever it was. We'd muster and go about our business.
And that's also a nice tight shot of where you would store all the equipment that you would be
That's where all the
transporting.
tanks or whatever it was.
Okay, next picture.
This is a picture out to sea. As you can see, we're carrying cargo, and it was wash day. There was a certain day you could wash your clothes and hang them out. So that was hanging out the wash.
Say like a Sunday or... By the way, during the war, was it quieter on Sundays? Was there any quiet day of the week when things sort of slowed down on the ship a bit?
Yeah.
Or no?
I can't remember.
Okay. All right.
I can't
Okay.
remember.
All right, good.
I think every day was the same.
Okay.
This is a ship, a picture rather, when we were told to make smoke. We get a message or something for some reason or other, all ships make smoke. I don't know whether it was to deter the enemy or what, but that's our ship making smoke.
And I can also see in the ship, it looks like, do you have your armaments? What were the, I see, look like 50 caliber,
40
20,
millimeter, I think we had 140 millimeter
140 up front?
up front.
Any 20 millimeters or 50s?
No, the only one I could recollect was the 40 millimeter.
Okay. Was your ship ever attacked? Any
No.
danger or anything
No,
like submarine danger?
Well, not that we know of, but we might have been in an area where...
Sure.
This is our captain, Captain Lashicott, when he went ashore.
Captain Lashicott.
Lashicott.
Okay.
And that's either at Wake or Okinawa when we go ashore to see the remnants of the island if it was taken back by our troops.
And I see he has on a stick, what's a skull, we see
Yeah,
this?
skull.
And also, just to the right of him, I bet this is Okinawa because it looks like a tomb over there. Okinawans had limestone on it, and they would make tombs out of it. So this might very well be Okinawa.
That's what we're saying about either Wake or Okinawa.
Okay, good. By the way, well, go ahead. Show us more pictures, then we'll talk about your officers once we get there.
Here's another picture of remnants of human parts, Okinawa.
And that's a person standing on the right side of the picture and picking with a stick, it looks like,
Yes.
at some of the human parts. And
Yes.
that would be as a result of the battles that took place.
Yes.
Bodies
In
blown.
taking, yeah.
A lot of odor and flies from that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
I didn't go ashore too much.
Okay.
But I did see this. Took a picture. There's a Japanese boy. He's soliciting for cigarettes.
Okay, let me focus on this. And that would have been on what island, most likely?
Japanese boy begging for cigarettes. Didn't say, but
Okay.
it's probably one of the islands.
And he had some lucky strikes in his hand.
Lucky strike.
Yeah. So you gave the kid cigarettes. Did you ever do that?
I didn't smoke, but the other guys did.
And at that time, did cigarettes come in the sea rations boxes?
Yes. Yes.
So you get some, you would give them away if you're not a smoker.
give them away.
Get peaches for it or some other.
That's right.
And yeah, that's what you would do if you're
That's
not
right.
a smoker. Sure.
Exactly.
Sure. Okay, good.
I didn't know I had it. This we're on the beach. Beaching at Okinawa or Wake. We're probably letting off some supplies.
Yeah, that's a pretty well. It could be very well Okinawa. It's a pretty wide beach over there.
Yeah, I say Okinawa on the
Yeah,
back.
yeah. And so your ship is a smaller ship.
Ours
in
is
the
a smaller one.
front. And behind us, the LST.
LST.
So that, for the viewer who may not be familiar with these types of ships, the LSM is 208 feet, and the LST is probably 350, 400.
Or at
You know,
least.
much different, larger
Much
ship
bigger.
and so on like that, and
Yeah.
more of an ocean-going ship, sure.
Yeah.
By the way, was there any, as far as being on an LST versus an LSM, did the guy say, gee, I wish I was on that ship versus this ship? Was it better to be on an LST?
Nobody ever talked about it.
You just, okay,
Just went along.
just where you're stationed or something.
That's
Like
it.
You're 17, 18, right?
Okay.
I know, I was there once. Any other pictures?
That's it. Oh,
That's it.
that's it. Mostly just unloading
Oh, let's see that.
okay. Jet fuel on one of the islands.
Okay.
That one says Guam,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the same picture.
Okay, I see. And that shows the front of the ship where your hull is opened up.
Yes.
And you just pull the equipment right off like that, right there. By the way, were you nervous handling that fuel, the aviation fuel,
Yeah,
because it can blow up very quickly, very high.
especially when you're at sea.
Sure.
And that's the same unloading.
And everybody there looks like they're all shirtless. Some are in shorts and so on like that. It's hot
Very hot and humid.
and humid in the Pacific. Did you ever go swimming out there?
Yeah, we did. We let the ramp down and we'd take swimming.
Any worry about sharks?
Yeah, we did. We didn't go too far.
Okay. Because they had a lot of, with the USS Indianapolis, that was torpedoed at the end of the war by Japanese sub, that when that ship went down, a lot of the men were killed by giant ocean-going sharks. I have a book on that, a horrible situation.
How about
But
that?
guys, and we even feared, when I was in Okinawa and then Vietnam, if you went swimming, you didn't go far because the water's very clear, but you're very worried about these ocean-going sharks coming in on you.
Yeah, that's what they told us when we went.
Yep, okay.
Believe me, I just jumped in and came out. I just jumped in to
Sure.
get refreshed. And we're carrying small trucks,
Let's take a look.
like jeeps, to one of the islands.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's loaded up with various trucking, jeep equipment, and
Yeah.
so on like that.
Yeah.
Sure. And that's a good shot on the left side of the picture of the tower. And roughly where that tower is, would you be sitting by one of those portholes?
Yes,
So you would have actually some ventilation.
yes, that's the radio shack.
I see. All right. And where would the captain be? Would there be a
The
bridge?
captain be the top of the conning tower.
Was the bridge open or and closed?
Open,
Oh, it was open.
Open.
Even in bad weather?
open bridge.
Really? So there's bad squalls and storms coming and you're standing out in the bad weather.
Bad weather.
So you had a good job sitting inside that.
I was
Better than being a helmsman aboard
I
one
had
of
a
these.
very good job.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Any others? We have all the pictures? Good.
Okay.
Okay, great. As we're continuing on the conversation, let me just focus back on you. Let me wind it up a little bit. There we go. You had total of 55 men in the crew, and you had officers. How were your officers? Because you're really living in tight quarters with these officers. Were they professional? Were they effective? Did you just want to get out of their way? Did you have some good, some not so good?
We had a good captain. He was very liberal with our movements. I dealt mostly with Ensign Reed, who was our communication officer. I didn't deal too much with the engineering officer or the other one. So they were all agreeable, and but Ensign Reed was very, very good. He had charge of the signalmen, radar men, and the radio men.
Did he know his stuff, so to speak?
Yes, I think he
He's pretty good.
knew his stuff.
So he couldn't send Morse code like you could, though. He
No.
wasn't skilled in that, sure.
No, he wasn't in that.
Yeah.
But he was I kept in touch with him after the war until he died.
Oh.
And but the other ones, like I say, the captain, I had most to do with the captain and Reed. The other ones,
And where did the officers sleep on the ship? Because quarters are so tight. Did
they
have their-
slept below. They slept.
This is the drill. This is the drill.
They slept down where we did, but they had separate compartments.
Did they each have their own compartment, or were they on one big room?
I think there was two, and the captain had his own. I think.
Okay. So they had much better conditions than the enlisted men did.
Oh, yeah. I imagine it was cramped, but
Sure.
137.
Let's talk a little bit about the engines on the ship. How many engines does a ship like this have? And
You know, I'm not too familiar with the engines. I did Fairbanks Morse or something.
yeah, they had two types of engines, two makes. GM diesels, or this other one, the Fairbanks, whatever.
Fairbanks. I heard that name,
Mhm.
but I didn't get involved in too much in
Yeah.
engineering because
Sure.
I wasn't
Sure.
interested.
Sure.
But they couldn't go very fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, if I may relate, this is a little off sidebar, but when I was on one of the islands, it doesn't matter, either Wake or Guam, we had mail call. So I got my mail. I opened the letter, and much to my dismay, what do you think it was? A Dear John
I
letter.
was going to say, Dear John.
Yeah,
Your girlfriend said goodbye, John.
goodbye. That was one of the most depressing parts of the time when I was on the ship. It was very devastating. But all bad things have a good ending. I came home, met another girl, married her, and had a nice family.
You're happy.
But at that time, it was very, I often wondered why somebody would do that to servicemen when they're out. Why not wait till they get home? But there's two sides to that story.
Yeah, did that happen to many other men on the ship?
No, I was the only one I've been on my ship.
And it's not unique. When I ran my platoon in Vietnam, 1969, several of my guys got these Dear John letters, and it got everybody upset because the men felt they're out in the middle of nowhere in Vietnam. They're in the infantry, and they get a Dear John letter because the girl says, "Oh, I'm not getting paid attention to." I said, well, guy would say, "What am I supposed to do? You're out in the middle of the Pacific. We're out in Vietnam."
Yeah, that's
And that one of my men, towards the end of his tour, wanted to commit suicide by going on dangerous patrols on point, and that you would have these men, in effect, commit suicide in a formal way,
wow.
informal way, whatever, by taking dangerous jobs. I wouldn't allow him to do that. And when he was going to go home, he found out his girlfriend was living with somebody. He was going to shoot him. And we called back to the Red Cross and the chaplain service in Washington, and they had a Catholic priest meeting him at his home air base in Washington area, Washington State, and they informed the girlfriend the whole thing so he would not kill them. He was very serious, and that's what it can do. I don't know, for the listener to this, maybe 100, 200 years from now, they may not understand whatever conditions are like in the future, but if you're sitting in a Pacific somewhere in 1944, 45, and you get this letter from your girlfriend says, "Goodbye, that's it."
Yeah.
What can you do about it? You're sitting on a little ship.
Yeah, that's true. And I thinking back now, my shipmates were very sympathetic. So I remember the radio men and all. They took my shift and just let me off by myself. So I do remember that part of it.
It sounds like your shipmates are there's a lot of camaraderie between
Oh,
them.
you're very close.
Right.
You get to know them.
Sure.
So
Now, at that point, if you're in a Pacific and you get a message, somebody gets a message that one of the crewmen's fathers or mothers or sisters passes away or is very ill.
yeah.
What happened? Did they ever get leave to go back to the States, or was that not allowed at the time?
It would be pretty hard to get leave if you're out in Okinawa. I mean, but we never had anything like that.
Nothing like that happened. Sure.
But I just was a sidebar.
Well, I tell you, that's very interesting. It's very important for people to know about that. That happens in any war. Whenever people are separated like that, it's hard to maintain a relationship. And a girl back home meets another guy. He's around. You're halfway around the world. And she says goodbye. What can you do about it? That's it. And it affects troops all the time.
Yeah,
I'm sure it does.
Yeah.
I'm sure it does.
Yeah.
Now, as the war, by the way, the war comes to an end in August 1945. You're all happy the war's over, but you stay in the Navy from 45 until 1946, April 1946. Are you still aboard the LSM 302 for the duration?
I was on the 302 until it was put in mothballs.
When was it put in mothballs about? Do you recall roughly?
April. I mean, March or so.
March
or April.
46?
Yeah.
So,
Green Cove Springs. Is that in Florida?
In Florida was put in mothballs.
Yeah.
And what did the ship do after the war is over? What was your job? I mean, you're out in the Pacific. What happens for about the
Getting
next
things
year?
ready to put it in mothballs. Packaging and all that type of thing.
You mean like taking equipment off these, like off of Guam or
Did-
Wake, or removing equipment and bringing it back?
Bringing it back and then getting our ship ready also. When we got back into Florida, helping disassemble the ship. And, that's about it. And then you had to accumulate so many points to get out of the service at that time, based on the months of duty. When you accumulated so many points, then you're eligible for either discharge or re-enlisting. Now, the recruitment officer would come around, of course, and try to get you to sign up. They wanted to give me a Radioman first class to sign up. I just felt I had enough. Sometimes I think back.
Can't imagine why you had enough at that point.
So I opted to get discharged, and from there I went to New York, Lido Beach. Lido, is that New York?
California?
No, it was in New York.
Okay.
Lido.
Okay.
Oh, it escapes me now. But anyway, I went from there, upstate New York, to get discharged. Then me and a buddy of mine who lived in Philadelphia, we hitchhiked it all the way back. Guy picked us up from there and drove us all the way to Philadelphia
In your Navy uniform, you're in uniform.
in my Navy uniform.
It was at that time easy to get rides hitchhiking.
Oh yeah, it was no. We stood out on the curb. I bet it was 10 minutes, and they stopped and picked us up. Said, "Where you going, sailor?" Says, "Well, I'm going to Jersey. He's going to Philly. I'm going to Philadelphia. Get in."
Oh, perfect. So you got a free ride there.
Free ride.
Sure, yeah. It was a different time in 1946.
Today they wouldn't do it.
Nobody would touch you today. You'd be arrested for trying to do that. Probably be a very, very,
That's
very
right.
different time.
That's right.
So, by the way, what happened to morale? Well, the war ends in 45 August. The men have to stay in for another year or so, and I bet a lot of them, like you, went to go home, get out. You did your job. What happened to the morale aboard the ship? Was it still good? Were guys all working? Were they tired of being there? Was there more complaints? Do you recall?
Anxious to get home.
Yeah.
Yeah, mostly men. I would say 30 or 40 of our crew were all married, grown men. The rest of us were young kids. So I think they were anxious to go.
Like get home, get to
Get
the
my
family.
points and go.
Sure.
So that was it. So then I came home and went to school under the GI Bill. I would never be able to go to school if it wasn't for the GI Bill.
Where'd you go to school, by the way?
I went to, at that time there was a accounting school. It was a commercial accounting school right near Rutgers in Camden. And I went there and got a certificate in accountants. And then I worked for a CPA firm. Then I went and worked for the Internal Revenue for 31 years. I retired from there. And then I got a big paying job on the Battleship New Jersey as a docent. And here I am.
And you get paid by the hour, $0.0 per hour, but you're having a good time doing it.
I'm having a good time. I came aboard in 2002. And I had to discontinue doing my tours in 210 because I got neuropathy in my leg. And I was so glad when they instituted the station docents. I was able to come back. And
By the way, as a docent who served in World War II, what are the questions people ask you about World War II? When you're on the ship, they find out you were in the Navy, World War II. What do they say to you?
most of them come up to me and shake my hand and thank me for my service. Yeah, they're very gracious. They'll say, were you in the war? Were you in the Navy? And I'll say, yeah, I was in the Navy. I served in World War II. Oh, they shake your hand. Thank you for your service.
Do the young children understand that or not? Or are they
Some
too,
of them do. I'm surprised how some of them do. They come shake your hand. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, John, is there any, we're sort of wrapping up the interview at this point. Is there any question I should have asked but I didn't, that you think is important to talk about?
I don't know. Asked me if I liked being in the Navy, or I sort of say that was some of the best years of my life. At the time you're in, as you probably know, you're griping all the time. You're always bitching about something. But when you get discharged, you say, that was a good life. And that's the way I look at it. It was a good life. I'd never traded in because it really made a man out of me. I was, how a 17, 18-year-old kid is. You know everything. Big shot. Well, when you get in boot camp, you're taken down a peg. And you get to know discipline. And that's where you learn yes, sir, no, sir, and so forth. So that'd be the main thing I would say.
So many young people today don't go in the military. Your generation, almost everybody went in.
Yes.
Do you think the young people today are being shortchanged by not having that similar experience?
Absolutely. I really think everyone out of school should get at least a year or two of some kind of training. I really do. But that's debatable, There's pros and cons to that. But in my experience, I'd say it turns you into a man who learns respect and discipline. So that's the story of my life.
Good. By the way, Hugh, any questions at this point? Have one. Just throw one out.
Nothing off the top of my head.
Nothing. Okay.
But when you landed in Okinawa, you said the battle was over, right?
Yeah, they had taken back the island.
Okay. Well, was there anticipation that this whole war was going to be over by the time you got to Okinawa?
You mean, were we impatient, you mean, you say?
Like, was there any anticipation that it's going to...
We never gave it a thought, but we were always anxious that the war would end because we had heard that we were probably going to be in the fleet for the invasion of Japan. And especially the older fellows, they weren't too happy about that. But me, I sort of thought, well, another adventure, But I would say the anxiety was mostly with the elderly men on the ship.
By the way, Okinawa, even though it's secured in spring, summer 1945, until 1949, the Marines on Okinawa were going on combat operations up in the northern part of the island, and the Japanese were still up there. And they were still taking casualties, even though the island officially is, taken in 45. And they would find Japanese up there into the 60s. Lone Japanese soldiers hiding out. There's a lot of volcanic caves up there.
Wow.
Where you could actually go in these little caves and enter into a room this size. You could, get supplies there, lay low. Nobody knows you're there. It's a very thick jungle on Okinawa. And I don't know if you saw that or not, but you could stick your hand out and not even see your fingers. So people did hide up there for many years
I can
later.
imagine. They were in them caves.
Sure.
Too.
And the coral caves. And I went into one of those, by the way, and it was just unbelievable. It was like the size of a gymnasium. You would go down a chute about 3 or 4 feet high, and you come to this cave, and they had it set up with all the supplies the Japanese used to have and so on like that. It was just amazing.
Is that right?
Sure. So when we're shelling Okinawa with our battleships and dropping bombs in it, you basically, crack the top of the coral, and you don't really get into destroying the supplies of the men in the caves and so on like that.
Yeah, they tell me that they use those flamethrowers.
Flamethrowers. The Marines used a lot of flamethrowers in
get
the
'em out.
Pacific area at the time. Sure. Well, John, thank you.
We done?
We have to wrap up the
Oh,
interview.
okay.
We have ways of doing it. John, I want to thank you very much for your conversation today. And today I've been talking with Mr. John Quinesso, who serves on the battleship BB-62 as a docent since the year 2002. And he's still working. This is his day on, Thursday. He's here every Thursday. And I was very happy to meet him a week or two ago on the deck. He served from late 1943 until April 1946 aboard the USS LSM landing ship mechanized. Medium, number 302, and they didn't have names, they had numbers, where he served as Radioman, achieving rank 2nd class. John, I want to thank you very much for the interview today. Today, of course, is the year 2013, and it is May 30th, I'll get it straight, 2013. I also want to thank you for your service too. It's very
Thank you very
important.
Thank you
You
very
know,
much.
World War II is a very important war. If we had lost it, we'd be very different, be in a different world today.
The greatest generation.
Definitely, I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
It was my pleasure.